Ask you, how did you get started with the in the auto industry? And
I got started or introduced my first role in the automotive industry was actually in high school. I grew up in Highland Park, went to Highland Park high schools, and my senior year, I was selected to have a co-op job at General Motors, where I worked in their powertrain division out in Warren. So I would spend my afternoons at General Motors, working in that area and learning a little bit more about what the team does there. And I was also taking care of myself because I was living alone my senior year of high school, taking care of myself and my young daughter at the time. So it was a great opportunity for me to be introduced to a world that I didn't know existed outside of Chrysler originally. Because growing up in Highland Park, I lived literally an eye shot from the Chrysler headquarters at that time. So I knew a lot of people who worked in the space and my neighbors, but I also was able to see every day executives coming and going from that location. So it was always something that I had been exposed to. I came to Ford in 1997, very shortly after I graduated from college, and it was supposed to be a temporary introduction to Ford Motor Company. It was supposed to be a 2-year assignment that I look back now 25 years and I'm still here. But it has been an amazing ride, and I've learned so much about how much this industry does, but also how much more this industry has to do.
so, since your early days, you've been involved in major business functions, purchasing and supply chain management. What was the atmosphere like for you as a woman coming into this industry, seemingly from the very beginning in those high-level positions when you first started?
Well, when I first started, my very first introduction here at Ford was in manufacturing. And so that was a very heavily male-dominated organization. I would say, I like to use seasoned employees because they had, long tenure. I was one of the younger people in the group. Actually, I was the youngest person in my group at the time. I would say back then it was more of a lot of observation was happening. I think for my part, being new and young, but also from employees. It was a lot of observation about what younger people brought to the table. I had a fantastic supervisor, my very first supervisor, who actually nurtured the teams around him. And because he had one of the younger teams, he was able to really lean into the different viewpoints that we did bring. He always asked our opinion about things. And sometimes he made major changes because of it. And so we felt like our voice was heard to a certain extent. But it was still also this time of proving yourself, right? What can you actually bring to the table? So for me, working in manufacturing at that time, in the office setting, it was exciting. Once I had the opportunity to start visiting all of our stamping and assembly plants, and I've been to almost every one in North America. The diversity there goes well beyond what we typically think about when we talk about diversity, right? You have age, you have education, you have background, you have thought processes, you have experience, skill set levels, all the things that kind of made it a little bit different in some instances, but I was able to navigate that pretty well because I like people. And so I literally kind of went in with the people first attitude whenever I entered a stamping or assembly plant, which I think allowed me the ability to move in that space a little bit more freely. But also I was humble because you get a chance to really see how much hard work goes into putting a vehicle together from one part to something rolling off the line. So I had a much deeper level of respect for our stamping and assembly plant workers than I had coming in.
So you talked about going into the plants and seeing the diversity of the workers on the plant floor, but you've been on the business side. So how would you describe the diversity, especially in the 25 years? What did it look like when you got there? Has it looked like as it's developed?
I think that we didn't know really how to talk about and actually leverage diversity at that time, right? So it was numbers. It was a numbers game. Right? I'll be very honest. It was a numbers game. And I remember accepting my position where I had a leader say to me, "Congratulations on working in this organization, but I don't want you to think you got this because you're a young Black female diversity candidate." And I was like, I didn't until you said that, right? And then I looked around the room and I saw that I was the only Black woman in the organization, in that room. And that's when it became very visible for me. And so, I will say that some organizations did it really well. Some groups inside of the company did it really well, and some didn't. And I think we still have that today, where we have major opportunity to continue to leverage the diversity that we have accessible to us, and then also be intentional about equity and inclusion, because we can get people here, but how are you helping them stay?
2020, you were named the first the racial equity director at Ford. So can you describe the creation of that position and what it meant to play that role?
I'll be honest, I was a little reluctant at first, because it was a very bold move to say we want to focus on race specifically. We had never talked about race. We talked about diversity, and we would dance around race, and then we just say women and minorities, right? We didn't really focus on being specific on the different requirements, different needs, and desires of each of the individual ethnicities that exist in Ford Motor Company. So this was huge, and I just wasn't sure if Ford was really ready to take that step. But when I was assured by our CEO, yes, he was very serious that this is something that he wanted to focus on. I talked over with my mentors and my friends and my family, and I'm like, this is going to be huge. And at the same time, we laid out a plan that said, be bold. Right? Part of that plan was to be bold, and this was a really amazing way to do that. So I stepped into the opportunity with a little bit of I would say caution, but also extreme excitement about what that could bring. And so for me, what it became was an opportunity to be in a room with decision makers to help them understand the importance of the work that we had in front of us. The importance of looking beyond the things that we see, the sex, the gender, the ethnicity, etc. But looking into what a person actually brings to the table and how we can pull that out. How can we bring all of that out for them? And that was the focus on equity, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. I met so many people across this company, and not just here in North America, but globally, that reached out and wanted to share their experiences, share their excitement, share their concerns. And in some instances, I was able to share information with them that they didn't have access to or they weren't aware of, that actually helped them feel more connected to what the company's purpose is and was. In addition, I was able to work with our leaders in helping them realize the importance of giving themselves permission to actually advocate for people in a different way, to go ahead and be bold when you might be the only one in the room. It's okay, right? Maybe somebody else is waiting for that person to step up and say it's okay to call out, inequities that we find. When I started to see those transformations, those were the highlights of my day. Even though some days were riddled with defeat, somebody's questioning why. If you think about the state of the country right now, it would be naive to think that you don't have those very differing thoughts of people internally in the company. Right? We're not immune to that. And so that everyone at the company is not, yay, rah, rah, but everyone at the company is not rah, rah, rah either, So you have those spectrums of people who are on board and those who just don't get it yet. And I love when we have that diversity in the room, because you're able to spark conversations that will lead to understanding.
I mean, how would you describe even the progress that happened since 2020 up until today? Where do you think the company stands now, and what do you think their goals are moving forward?
Yeah, the goals are to continue to leverage and build upon what our CEO's mission is, right? Is to really focus in on the foundation of everything that we're doing is to care for our people. So when we start to do that and think about whatever area we're working in, we're working with people. Our customer is a person. Our employees are people. And so when we start to remove those titles and just really look at the human, and have that human-centered focus in the work that we do, then that's how we move forward. I think that the role itself created a level of awareness that gave people, like I said, the permission and that comfortable feeling to start having these conversations, to challenge each other to be better, and to move beyond creating awareness right? It's diversity has always been there. Inclusion has always been there, but we never talked about equity. And that's where we put a lot of the focus over the past 2 years, is what does it take to really focus in on the individual so that they can have an equitable outcome. We're still moving in that area. We still have a lot of work to do. It's not something that's a one and done. I think because of the nature of people, we're going to always evolve and change, and we're going to always have the opportunity to do something different or better, and to see things differently. So as long as we keep that intentional focus on people, I think that we will continue to get there.
How important is it for you, both personally and professionally, to now, you've been mentored, to be a mentor, to be a role model to those around you? We talk about that.
Yeah, mentorship is something that I don't take lightly, and it's something that I probably get more fulfillment out of than anybody else. As I mentioned earlier, I had wonderful mentors throughout my career. Some that looked like me, and many who did not. When I think about my first introduction to a mentor, before I even knew that's really what I had, I would have to say that it was in high school, and my high school counselor and a teacher. I had one high school counselor and one teacher, both females, who I looked up to so much. And I think it was because of how they pushed me on those days that I was like, I have an excuse for everything. I have an excuse for this one. And they were like, no. I had this one teacher who said, excuses are monuments of mere nothingness, building bridges that lead to nowhere, and those of them who use these tools of incompetence are masters of their own destruction. And she would make me recite that to her whenever I was late to class or didn't have an assignment. I'm like, excuses are monuments of mere nothingness. And when I got to college and I pledged my sorority, that was a saying that was told to me, and I immediately clicked. And I'm like, she was also a member of my sorority. As I played back all the things, how she walked, how she talked, how she dressed, I was like, she absolutely was. So she was already pushing me to excellence, and letting me know that I couldn't give excuses to get things, not do things, not get things done. And I do share that with my children as well. I'm like, excuses are monuments of mere nothingness. But it really keeps that thing in front of you to let you know that you can either do this, you can be all in, right? Or you can not do this, but don't half step anything that you do. So giving back to me is very important, because I could be the one that someone needs to help push them forward at the end of the day.
Of all your accomplishments, both in the company and sort of in the community, what do you say you're most proud of?
There's so many things I'm actually really, really proud of that I have been able to do personally and professionally. I would say personally, listening to my parents enough to know that I can steer myself out of situations that probably aren't going to lead to a good outcome. That's something that my parents instilled in me. But also, I would say, raising my children on my own for 13 years before I found my mate, my soulmate, and having more children with him and getting married and all of that. But professionally, I would say something that I'm really, really proud of is receiving the Emerging Leaders Award from Reverend Jesse Jackson in 2019, because he was recognizing the work in the industry that I was doing with diverse businesses, specifically Black-owned businesses. And that was recognized by him, and as somebody I've looked up to like literally my whole life, and the things that he's been able to accomplish. And he paid attention to what was happening at Ford and zeroed in on the work that we were doing in supplier diversity. And that's a huge accomplishment for me, to be recognized at that level. But also, being able to be appointed to the racial equity role at Ford Motor Company. That is huge, and it's because it's not something that I went for, I applied for, or anything like that. It was through the efforts, my personal efforts at trying to build an inclusive environment in the space that I was in, that provided visibility to our leadership for me to receive that nomination for the appointment to this role.
All right, so what would you say to those who are maybe just getting into it, or maybe looking at down the road what the future may be? What would you say to them?
The automotive industry is not what it was when I came in. It was all about cars, and then I was all into trucks, so it was all about trucks in my world. But it is now this mixture of technology and automobiles coming together to be something so different. And so for women especially who are thinking about entering the space, I think it's important for them to recognize that it is ever evolving, right? We're seeing the future, what we thought was so futuristic so long ago, that seemed so very near ago, right? That's now. We're living through that right now, and I can see the future. I don't know, I'm not a futurist, but I see flying cars one day in our future, right? Somebody's gonna make it happen, because those are things that we thought were untouchable. Things that we thought were, sci-fi, that's real today. And so the imagination really can come together with talent to bring something to life. So to me, that's what the automotive industry is. It is an ever-evolving space of talent and skill set that comes together to create magic.